Zatiranga, Giro Motete, producteur en dollar. Arrivé en France, il a trop souffert, passé les nuits dans les métros. Il a travaillé dur pour devenir producteur en dollars. Giro Motete. Je remercie la France qui m'a adopté et la Centrafrique qui m'a aimé et accepté.
Sous la Congoli, en salsa.
Oh Seigneur, dis-moi pourquoi je suis fort.
Seigneur.
Oh Seigneur, je voudrais savoir pourquoi je suis très très fort. Seigneur.
Sonny Abacha, Carlos Star, Legria, très très fort. Famille Matundu Mabiara, Giro Motete, fils de maman, Doumi Suzanne Agnès, et de papa, Louis Zatiranga, Giro Motete, producteur en dollars. Arrivé en France, il a trop souffert, passé les nuits dans les métros. Il a travaillé dur pour devenir producteur en dollars. Giro Motete. Je remercie la France qui m'a adopté et la Centrafrique qui m'a aimé et accepté.
Sous la Congoli,
M'a aimé et accepté.
sous la Congoli, en salsa.
Oh Seigneur, dis-moi pourquoi je suis fort.
Seigneur.
Oh Seigneur, je voudrais savoir pourquoi je suis très très fort. Seigneur.
Sonny Abacha, Carlos Star, Legria, très très fort. Famille Matundu Mabiara, Giro Motete, fils de maman, Doumi Suzanne Agnès, et de papa, Louis Zatiranga, Giro Motete, producteur en dollars. Arrivé en France, il a trop souffert, passé les nuits dans les métros. Il a travaillé dur pour devenir producteur en dollars. Giro Motete.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is time for 60 minutes of the very latest news development wrap-up here on Channel Africa, The African Perspective. This is Africa World Hour. I am Tsepiso Makwetla. Thank you so much for joining us as we bring you up to speed on what's happening in and around your world, from the heart of the continent to all corners of the globe. Welcome to it. Let's take you straight through to your headlines this evening. And just a reminder that you can listen to us on social media. We'd like to hear what your thoughts are on some of the stories that we are covering. Plus 2763406926. That's the number that you can send your messages to, whether it be voicemail or text. So starting off with Burkina Faso, it has sentenced 13 people to life imprisonment for acts of terrorism, including a 2018 attack against the French embassy. More than 60 others were given lesser jail terms. This is according to an official statement released yesterday by a specialist anti-terror judicial office. The West African nation has been battling jihadist violence, and that's been so for the past decade. That the junta, which came to power in a coup in September 2022, has been struggling to contain. Africa political expert Kwezi Ngcebisa has more on this.
One of the positive things that I take out of this particular development is that at least the administration in Burkina Faso wants to explore the path of an institutional response, whereby there would be some form of legal process that would be processing individuals who might have engaged in activities that fall outside the normal criminal code. So I think it's something positive as to the integrity of that legal process. That is something that we still have to process and look at, but perhaps.
And we'll be bringing you up to speed with more developments from West Africa in just a moment. Just a reminder that you can watch us, stream us live on YouTube. We are also on Facebook and Twitter, and we are available for you to share with us what's happening in and around your world. Let's take a quick break.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective. The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
Right, let's continue with the top stories this hour. The European Union, joined by foreign ministers from 24 countries, have declared that humanitarian crisis gripping Gaza has reached unimaginable levels. They issued a plea to Israel to immediately lift all barriers to aid delivery, demanding that every crossing and route be opened to allow a massive influx of food, water, medicine, fuel and shelter to the enclave. The joint appeal, with backing from senior EU officials, warns the region is teetering on the brink of famine, saying that urgent action to stop and reverse starvation is needed. Bonolo Maribe has more.
Foreign ministers have urged the Israeli government to authorize all international NGO aid shipments to allow essential humanitarian works to operate in the enclave. This appeal comes as Gaza experiences an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, which has worsened since March when Israeli authorities closed access to the Strip. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates have welcomed the statement and urged all countries and international organizations to turn the consensus into concrete steps to hold Israel accountable for its actions against Palestinian civilians.
And moving on, still on the issue of Palestine, those supporters of Palestinians have gathered outside St. George's Cathedral in Cape Town to protest against the killing of journalists in Gaza. The group says Israel is deliberately targeting networks critical of its occupation in Palestine and has called on the media worldwide to report accurately and without fear of favor. Gift of the Givers founder Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman has more.
We're calling on the media throughout the world to start challenging governments to make a decisive stand inside Gaza. We're calling on media to ask to enforce the United Nations to send troops in the ground in Gaza, like what was done in Bosnia. Safe havens were created, people were protected, the doors were open. Neighboring countries need to open the doors so aid can go in unlimited, unconditionally.
And moving on now to Zimbabwe, there is growing uncertainty after the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe announced that it will launch a new roadmap in November to guide the country toward abandoning the US dollar as a currency by 2030. Zimbabwe's economy has been operating under a multi-currency regime dominated by the US dollar since hyperinflation disseminated its value of the local currency in 2009. Economic commentator Clemens Matambo has more.
The local currency has lost value in so many times. People have borne the brunt of the loss of value in the past, and that has really caused so many challenges and problems.
And finally, wildfires continue to afflict parts of Europe, including the Iberian Peninsula, Greece and the Balkan countries amid an ongoing heat wave. Thousands of people have been evacuated and some have been closed. The roads, that is. The BBC's Danny Iberhard has the details.
High temperatures and a drought mean much of Europe is facing an extreme fire risk. Mediterranean countries are bearing the brunt. In Spain, the emergency services and troops are battling dozens of blazes, including in the northwest. A volunteer firefighter in Leon was killed when two fronts suddenly joined. In Greece, homes in Patras are threatened. One volunteer has described doomsday-like scenes. Other fires are burning on the tourist islands of Zakynthos and Chios.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Mozambique's opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has been charged with incitement to terrorism and disobedience. He faces a total of 5 charges. The charges relate to post-election violence that left hundreds of people dead. What punishment is he looking at?
The most severe charges are 2. One is incitement for terrorism, and also is being charged for mobilizing people for terrorism during the protests. These charges are really serious and severe. If he is condemned, is found guilty, he could serve 10 years plus years in jail, meaning that he would be banned from political participation, mainly for the 2028 and 2029 electoral cycle.
The director of CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, Adriano Novunga.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
C'est notre invitée du jour, la belle Aïna Mwenze. Elle est là, certaines l'appellent Boss Lady.
Bonjour Monsieur Jolino.
Parlez-nous un tout petit peu de vous.
Je m'appelle Boss Lady Aïna. Je mets l'accent sur le nom de Boss Lady parce que je mérite cela après le travail fait. Et c'est une rémunération en titre de la personne que je suis devenue aujourd'hui. Épouse et une mère de 4 garçons. Et voilà ce que je peux dire pour l'instant.
Et vous vous êtes lancé dans le business. Comment c'est venu?
En tant que mère et se retrouvant dans les pays étrangers, particulièrement en Afrique du Sud, je me disais que laisser les enfants sur la charge des travailleurs ou d'une bonne, ça serait pas très intéressant. Je me suis dit, bon, je dois essayer de m'organiser et trouver un emploi que je peux faire.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
And we continue with an update on what's happening in and around the continent and the globe. And we start the hour, and just a reminder that we will be looking once again at South Africa's political fortunes, democratic process as the country looks forward to a landmark national dialogue which starts tomorrow. But we will be speaking to a think tank called Mistra, a lead researcher there, on a report that they've compiled that shows that the ANC party, which was once the governing party, will most likely only get a majority in 2 provinces. So we'll look at that in just a moment. But let's continue with this report now. We talk about fires that are happening in Europe, and we'll also look at this issue, and that is, of course, a report from our colleague Sherwin Bryce Pease on Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International being among a global rights group that have sharply criticized the U.S. State Department's annual country reports on human rights and cooperation. So let's start with this, and that is... across Africa, billions of dollars worth of minerals lying beneath the soil, yet in many of the cases, governments don't fully know what they have. In the conversation, researchers compared Ghana and Rwanda's approaches to mapping and managing their mineral wealth, revealing stark differences driven by politics, policy, and long-term planning. Dr. Gerald Aaron, a research fellow in the political economy of climate-compatible development at University College London and co-author of the piece, joins us now to explain why knowing what's underground could be the key to Africa's future prosperity. A very good evening to you, Gerald, and thank you so much for speaking to us. And please do correct me if I have pronounced your surname incorrectly.
No, that's right on spot. That's Gerald Ahene. Thanks so much for having me. Very good regards to your viewers as well.
This is such an important discussion because, I mean, just thinking of South Africa, as a South African, we have a housing problem, but we also have land ownership problem. And a great deal of that is driven by the fact that we don't know what land we have and in whose hands it is. So let's speak about this then. Conversely, when we speak about mineral wealth, how many African countries, who of course have rich deposits of this, actually know what is beneath their ground?
Yeah, I mean, great question. This sort of problem in terms of knowing what is beneath the ground, having that geological map or data of the mineral of that countries to have is quite prevalent in a lot of developing countries, and African countries are not spared in this regard. There is actually, I mean, proud to this piece that we wrote and people we wrote around the politics and policy of it, there is actually a good financial and technical reason for which this is quite widespread on the African continent. Financially, of course, we do know that it costs millions in order to do such geological investigations. And given Africa's limited resources, we often would rely on donors for this purposes. The technical aspect has to do with the geological formation of a lot of minerals in terms of how loosely they are deposited. So it comes with a lot of risk such that it is difficult to predict the economic viability prior to this investigation. So a lot of African governments, from the technical and financial point of view, deem it to be of higher risk in terms of investing in these resources. I mean, investing in this geological investigations when they know there may be chance of not having economic viability when there are competing needs for the same resources. So that is actually the widespread nature of it, and which is why a lot of governments tend to rely on foreign capital or foreign companies to engage in these explorations and licenses, which of course turn out to be disadvantaged to the African government in terms of revenue gained.
So firstly, let's start with getting an accurate picture of mineral deposits that are underground of each and every country. What would be the most reliable and accurate method of carrying out such a study of mineral knowledge? Let's start with that, and then you can go on to the mineral knowledge gap to running a business without knowing what's in your warehouse, that analogy that you've used.
Yeah, I mean, the technology has evolved over the years, like radio sensing, remote sensing technologies have evolved over the years, which makes it a bit less time consuming to embark on such geological investigations. However, doing this, as I alluded earlier, would require huge financial costs, but also the technical issue with there, which I hinted around the loosely deposited nature of these resources. But more importantly, and I'm sure we get into that a bit, has to do with the politics of it, the extent to which countries tend to be committed in embarking really in this geological purpose. And it leads us to the sort of analogy we mentioned around running a business, but not necessarily knowing what is in there in your warehouse. So it's more of a gambling game that a lot of African governments do engage in terms of issuing reconnaissance or exploration licenses to different companies to do this exploration on our behalf and tell us what is beneath there, and this is costed along those lines. A lot of African governments embark on what we call the first come first serve licenses. So companies that do a first bid tends to win the license in engaging in exploration rather than a competitive bidding, which means initial cost is also borne by the companies and covered later on when there is economic viability of discovery. So they tend to factor in the cost of production in the agreement that is being signed at the leasing stage of it. And that does not help a lot of African governments to gain the needed revenue that it requires from its resources, because this information or this sort of geological map lie in the hand of foreign capital, with African governments having limited control over what is beneath their own soil.
So in this geological mapping and the comparison between Ghana and Rwanda, what have you found?
Yeah, so we realize that beyond the financial and technical cost, politics also plays a crucial role in a commitment of government to these geological investigations. So in the case of Ghana, the nature of the political system since 1992 has been one that we call competitive clientelism, competitive settlement, I should say, which means there is regular turnover of political administrations, mainly between the New Patriotic Party, NPP, and the National Democratic Congress, the NDC. The short-term turnover, which is usually between 4 to 8 years, simply means that governments tend to be committed to projects that have got short-term manifestations that would also gain them some form of electoral imperative. However, ventures like geological investigations take time, like almost a decade. And for governments to invest or commit to that monetarily would be less incentivized when it comes to electoral imperative, because it wouldn't have manifested for them to use it on a campaign platform, rather than investing in short-term projects like maybe building roads or hospitals, or investing in education, which has got more immediate electoral imperatives. So as a result, a lot of successive governments, Ghanaian governments, do have some form of reluctance in committing to these geological investigations. However, in Rwanda, since the post-genocide, since 1994, the RPF, the Rwanda Patriotic Front party, has got some form of long-term horizon and higher implementation capacity, which means it's got some form of potential to commit to some geological investigations. However, we also realize that despite the Rwandan government having that capacity, there is competing interest with its interest and conflicting minerals from DRC, where it relies on some form of minerals from there. Of course, there is some form of protection for the Tutsis in there as well. But with the RPF having that long-term goal of self-reliance, there is that form of commitment to know some form of geological data in its own domestic mineral sector. So in the past decade, there have been some substantial investments in there, of course, with the help of some donor countries like Canada and UK to invest in some geological mapping. However, the country still has got some limited capacity in undertaking this on its own. So essentially, we realize that politics plays a crucial role in terms of the ideas and interests of ruling elites in deciding the extent to which they get committed to these geological investigations.
Now let's move on to mining policies and how the route taken by countries. You speak about competitive politics in Ghana, but more strategic thinking in Rwanda. How those affected, but most importantly, also speak to us about climate compatible development, how that's also thrown into the mix.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question because, of course, with the onset of transitioning away from fossil fuel to more climate compatible forms of energy, critical minerals, as we want to put it, in terms of these minerals which are essential for climate-friendly infrastructure like solar panels or wind power is become crucial. And Africa also harbors a lot of these minerals. The challenge is with the geopolitical context or competition for these minerals by developed countries. A lot of countries on the continent are engaging in bilateral relations. And of course, again, here, African countries still have limited knowledge on what is beneath their soil here. And it's precipitating a lot of bilateral agreements between governments and, say, Chinese companies or EU, for instance, which have got differential forms of agreements, which in some cases we see countries trying to gain more from beneficiation policies like the ban on lithium in Zimbabwe and ban on exports of raw critical minerals in Namibia, for instance, being a way of gaining some benefits across the value chain. However, knowing the exact minerals beneath the resources which can give African countries the bargaining power in negotiating better deals is still missing, I should say.
Okay. So just finally, looking ahead and what African countries can do moving forward, either towards Rwanda's model and if it can be improved, but how to avoid the short-termism that you spoke about.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I should say that proud to independence of a lot of African countries, most of these mappings were being done by different colonial powers. And today, with the new scramble for minerals for the energy transition, it is the same colonial powers who are scrambling for these minerals on the African continent. But we see a perpetuation of the same old negativity associated with the mining sector, even worsening in these current days. I think African governments would have to think more strategically in terms of thinking about the energy transition that Africa wants and what we can gain from same, rather than short-term gains with the revenues and what have you is being gained from that, and playing into this whole geopolitics or competition by developed countries to gain control over the value chains of these minerals. One key advantage which African countries strategically can make use of is continental, but also regional cooperation. The AfTA, the African Free Trade Continental Agreement, is one such way that African countries can leverage on in order to have higher bargaining power across this value chain. Otherwise, we continue being the periphery in the global value chain.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I much appreciated your time, your insights, valuable information there. Dr. Gerald Aaron, Research Fellow in the Political Economy of a Climate Compatible Development at University College London, speaking to us about that recent article that he penned in The Conversation, comparing Ghana and Rwanda's approaches to understanding their mineral wealth, but also just speaking about what African countries in general can do in terms of geological mapping to ensure that its citizens benefit largely from this. And of course, how to work smarter in terms of their mining industries.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Stella Longwe pamalonje
palitu sokoma pano pamalonje kumvera nyimbo za mu Africa kusangalala kupeza moyo akuti kumva moyo kuti kuyenda bwino pano pamalonje ndiyetu apa tili ndi katswiri oyimba ameneyu ndikatswiri wa dziko la Malawi amene akukhala mdziko la South Africa ndipo amayimba amene akuti ndi Big Nick Malawi yatuzani kuti kodi moyo wanu woyimba ukuyenda bwanji mu Johannesburg?
Moyo woyimba ukuyenda bwinobwino kwambiri chiliyonse chikutheka ndithu bwinobwino.
Ayi aziwoneka chiliyonse chikutheka mofa magrasi anu apa mwaka akuti kumenya yonse aziwoneka zoti azikutheka ndithu mu Johannesburg.
Malonje pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe.
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
Ethiopia's planned Bishoftu International Airport, its scale, its timelines, and its potential to position the country as Africa's aviation leader. What will this mega project mean for Ethiopia's investment climate, job creation, and tourism? And how will it shape regional and global connectivity?
Ethiopian Airlines is by far the largest airline in Africa and amongst the 30 largest in the world. Ethiopian Airlines owns the airports in this country. So, you just need to put that in context. Last week, they announced their results. They had transported 19 million passengers, something like $7.6 billion in revenue, which places them amongst the 3 most profitable airlines in the Middle East Africa region after Emirates and Qatar Airways. In fact, except for Ethiopian Airlines, virtually no state-owned airline in Africa today makes money. Many African governments make it difficult for airlines to operate efficiently and profitably. That includes South Africa, by the way.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And it is 30 minutes past 9. You are listening to Africa World Hour, watching Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African perspective. We're live on the DSTV audio channel 802. We are also live on YouTube, where we're live streaming at Channel Africa. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram on that handle as well. And of course, you can also watch us live on the SABC Plus app. So we talk about South Africa's political map now. It's been shifting before our eyes. The Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, or MISTRA, is warning that by 2029, the African National Congress could retain outright control in only 2 provinces, Limpopo and the Eastern Cape. From Gauteng to KwaZulu-Natal, Free State to Mpumalanga, coalition governments are no longer the exception, but they're going to be the rule, it says. And national politics is already testing the limits of its fragile new order. At the center of this analysis is Professor Susan Boyson, one of South Africa's most astute political minds. She's the lead researcher for this report. She unpacks with me now the numbers, the strategies, the stability or instability of coalitions, and whether the government's much touted national dialogue is going to be a bridge to unity or rather a bridge to nowhere. A very good evening to you, Prof. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Siblisa. Very good to speak to you.
Let me just start with that national dialogue. It kicks off tomorrow. Although we spoke to the Moses Kotane Foundation yesterday, and they were saying their understanding of it is that this is a precursor to a national dialogue. Just to share your thoughts about this, because it'll also give us a sense of where South Africa is politically.
Yes, indeed. I think I would summarize it quite well if I say it's pandemonium and confusion as to what is the exact status of this national dialogue. There are still so many different presentations as to who is actually in charge of it. Government people, ANC people saying, presidency people, I guess, is saying they are ready to hand over to civil society. Civil society and various opposition parties are saying this is a government-led and specifically a presidency-led initiative. And another point of discontent regarding the dialogue, I would say, is the fact that people are not sure what is the point of having dialogues, since South Africans are pretty good at having conversations about the problems and what needs to be done on a daily basis. So that is already there. And it is going ahead. People are concerned about how much money is being spent on it. And so it's really a den of problems which probably will be overtaken a little bit once conversations gets going. But as far as preparatory stages go, I don't think all the different signals we getting are boding well for success of this initiative.
And as we speak now, we speak with South Africa being governed by a government of national unity. And it is that unity that I want to underscore. Not only the role of national dialogues, looking back at CODESA, for instance, where their potential and the ultimate outcome. There are those who are accusing the ANC, obviously through the presidency, of using it to garner votes in the 2029 elections. Is that possible? Can that really be a thing? And just looking at how governments of national unity or coalitions are functioning, nationally versus provincially, where is the stability or instability?
Yes, indeed. In the first place, it's not a question, I would say, of being able to manufacture votes directly. If we talk just ANC at the moment, and ANC unambiguously, even if it's a government of national unity, a coalition government, just politically, there's a political choice to call it a government of national unity. But ANC within this GNU, government of national unity, is not sharing power willingly, and is not offering much power, if any power at all, to its coalition partners. And this is also one of the accusations that I heard today, that the GNU partners are saying, as they have been saying on many other issues, that they had not been consulted, that this was really a decision that had been taken unilaterally by the ANC and is being run with mainly by ANC in government. So that brings us actually directly to this point of power sharing and GNU and how it operates. We know this GNU of South Africa came about just over a year ago in June last year, when the ANC didn't get an outright majority anymore. In many countries, the party is just the plural majority, the biggest share, a block of the vote, even if it's not 50% plus, is allowed to vote. In South Africa, the political party requires an outright 50% plus majority. The ANC did not get that after multiple elections where they had huge majorities, and then it started slipping very fast. And the ANC was not keen on going in with other parties, but it had to. And the DA was the primary party that negotiations took oath with. Also because, and that is very much the game of coalition politics in South Africa, as we also show in this MISTRA report. It's a numbers game. Anybody can more or less align with anybody, irrespective of ideology, of policies, etc., that may be very divergent and contradictory. And that we saw at the national level then when ANC and the DA came together. But the ANC faced then, and still continues to face, much internal resistance against this GNU alliance, which includes the DA, Democratic Alliance, as a major partner. And it then brought on a bunch of 8 other, mostly micro parties. And that is a lesson that the ANC had been learning from local government coalitions, which in South really blossomed. Such a big expansion since 2016 local government elections, and again a few years ago in 2021, large escalation in numbers of local government coalition cases, and 70 of these are the subject of the local government section of MISTRA's coalition report. But in that, the ANC had really taken on the board, which nationally it's been using to great effect, of small parties to construct a majority. In April and around there this year, the ANC even used that strategy, which is unheard of in coalition politics, to go shopping outside of your coalition, of the GNU 10-party coalition, for other parties to build support and get a majority. And that did not sit very well. But that is part of this big strategy. South Africa, then alternative majorities.
Let me jump in on that point about the sincerity of the coalition culture then, not only in South Africa, but what we've learned from other countries around the world. We've seen delegations from South Africa go and study in Europe how other countries get it right, particularly we've seen Germany and other countries. But is it a misnomer to speak about sincerity when we talk about coalition culture? Because is it not transactional in nature? Because you are obviously seeking to get into bed with someone so that you can govern.
Yes, indeed. It is a very transactional coalition dispensation. If the parties govern together and agree to govern together and agree to share power, even if the power sharing is not very effective, that is a coalition government. But in South Africa, and that is, I think we're manifesting a particular type of this coalition government. And that is, as you mentioned, very transactional, very hollow in terms of convergence. Yeah, and one doesn't expect coalition partners to converge on everything, to have totally the same ideology or policies, but there must be a set of convergent policies on which a coalition government, any coalition government that's successful, really can show that they converge on a set of agreed policy issues. In South Africa, we didn't get that type of negotiations on what would be that core set of policies on which they agreed. They agree on objectives, broad, vague objectives on economic development, reduction of unemployment, etc. But the ways in which they propose to get there are very, very different. And that's a almost daily contestation between the major parties as to how these goals should be achieved. That is a very acrimonious part, a contestational part of this coalition that we have in South Africa. And now they mentioned the word contestation. It is really a core ingredient of our coalition government here and the national one here, where even court cases, it's not totally exceptional, but it's so regular and rife in our coalition government nationally.
So finally, Prof, and just briefly, please, if we're talking fragmentation versus consolidation, if you are saying, according to your study, that the ANC may only find itself with outright majority in 2 provinces, is there anything that it can do along the way, or is it a natural death an implosion of the ANC as we know it and knew it?
So that assertion that I make with regard to the coalition statuses of the provinces is really based on a very simple trends analysis of provincial results, outcomes of the ANC in elections, how the trends have been moving over the years. And since 2004, and one or two provinces, 2009, has been on a consistent, unchanged downward curve, and took quite a big dip in the last election. And to that extent that it's only these two provinces, the Free State and Mpumalanga, that are it's currently, they are the two that are closest now to also falling below 50%, 52, 53% of the support in those provinces. And if the trend continues, they will slip into the minority outcome for the ANC in those provinces. And specifically to your question, there is nothing that I see happening that's transpiring politically or inspiring a newfound faith or a reinvigorated faith and belief in ANC in those provinces or in other provinces that could suggest at this stage, given that we are still 4 years away from the next election provincially, but there are no indications at this stage of new invigorating influences, leadership emerging. So if anything is to be done about that, it would be strong inspirational leadership, unambiguous clean government, and a very, very clear mission statement. And the mission statement which may, in fact, not be that possible anymore, given that it is now a coalition government and serious, important issues have to be consulted.
Prof, thank you very much. Much appreciated your time and sharing with us the insights from your report and, of course, your own personal thoughts. Indeed. That is Professor Susan Booysens. She is the lead thinker of that report at MISTRA, the Mapungubwe Institute, and just speaking to us about that. South Africa entering a phase where political survival often comes, she says, before public service, and coalitions can be as fragile as they are necessary.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
C'est notre invitée du jour, la belle Aina Mwenze. Elle est là, certaines l'appellent Boss Lady.
Bonjour Monsieur Gelino.
Parlez-nous un tout petit peu de vous.
Je m'appelle Boss Lady Aina. Je mets l'accent sur le nom de Boss Lady parce que je mérite cela après le travail fait. Et c'est une rémunération en titre de la personne que je suis devenue aujourd'hui. Épouse et une mère de 4 garçons. Et voilà ce que je peux dire pour l'instant.
Et vous vous êtes lancé dans le business, comment c'est venu?
En tant que mère et se retrouvant dans les pays étrangers, particulièrement en Afrique du Sud, je me disais que laisser les enfants sur la charge des travailleurs ou d'une bonne, ça serait pas très intéressant. Je me suis dit, bon, je dois essayer de m'organiser et trouver un emploi que je peux faire.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
And as we wrap up Africa World Hour this evening, we talk about this issue, and we'd like to hear your thoughts about this. The Afrobarometer releasing its latest flagship report revealing that African youth are far less engaged in political and civic activities rather than their elders, with one key exception: protests. The findings are based on more than 53,000 interviews across 39 African countries. To unpack the numbers and what they mean for the continent's future, we're joined now by Lionel Esima Osei, Afrobarometer Assistant Project Manager for North and West Africa. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Is it Lionel or Lionel?
It depends. It's Lionel for the Anglophones and Lionel for the Francophones.
Okay.
Good evening and thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us. So let's just start with a quick snapshot of what the report sets out to measure and why.
So the report focuses on political participation. So last year we started our series of flagship reports. So we did we portrayed a bigger picture of how we are fed on democracy for the past 25 years of Afrobarometer Connected Survey. So this year we've decided to come with a more specific thematic area, which is political participation and civic engagement in Africa, in order to give a much broader or specific picture of how Africans are engaged in the political domain across the continent.
Okay, so the report highlights an 18 percentage point gap in voter turnout between young people and older generations. So why do you think that there are fewer younger people who are involved in the political or democratic processes?
So let's say that, so the report is showing that we have two key drivers of participation across the continent. So we have the need. So those who are in need, those who are more in need are less likely to engage. And also we have democracy. The more there is democracy, more people are engaged. And we know that across the continent, our data have shown that there is a decline in satisfaction with democracy. Maybe that explains why the youth are less engaged as compared to others, because there may be a youth satisfaction about how democracy has worked throughout the years on the continent.
So just in terms of civic engagement, do the younger generation have a lesser sense of a community spirit? And I ask this because I see your reports, they are less likely to go to town hall community meetings or even engage with local community leaders. Why is that?
So the explanation can be that the youth are dissatisfied, or they are not happy with the way things have been managed on the continent throughout the years, and them not showing up at those different political gatherings is a way of expressing that discontent. And also we need to also bear in mind that on our continent we use let's say the youth as puppets for political gatherings, and maybe they have begun to realize that they are being utilized by their leaders who are not actually delivering on their mandates for them across the continent.
So it's a form of protest, you'd say?
a protest and a discontent. Yeah, I prefer using discontent about the way things are being managed. They have the sense that them being there would not change anything.
Okay. No, I just meant a form of protest as in not engaging in those community or civic engagement tools available to them. So you focus on North and West Africa. Are there particular trends that you're seeing? And if so, what are they? And were there any surprises that you picked up in your study?
Come again, please.
I'm saying you focus on North and West Africa. Are there particular trends that you have picked up? And if so, what are they? And were there any surprises?
Yeah, there are some trends. So in West Africa, we see that we have countries such as Senegal and Niger, where we see the highest levels of participation and demonstration. For instance, we saw recently, I think that was last year, the youth protest in Senegal for democracy in their country. We've seen the same thing in Nigeria with the EndSARS, the protest from the protest against the violence from the security forces in Nigeria. So there are some trends, and we see that in Tunisia, for instance, in the northern part of the continent, exhibits the lowest levels of participation on the continent. So there are trends within those regions in West Africa and North Africa, with some countries exhibiting more higher levels of participation in civic engagement than others. And this is due to the youth activism in those countries.
So would you define it as historical or political disparities, so the reasons that there are differences in the voting patterns?
So differences in voting patterns. So definitely, yeah, the pathways are different. The pathways are totally different from one country to another, from one region to another. So you need to investigate deeper into the local political context of every country in order for you to have a better understanding, a better picture of why there are these discrepancies between one country to another. And as I was saying, it's good to take time to see how things are unfolded at the country level to understand why the dynamics are different moving from one country to another.
Okay, and I want to talk about digital platforms, what role they are playing, and is there hope of them boosting meaningful political participation, particularly amongst the youth?
I think from what we've seen happening in Kenya, whereby the protest movement led by the youth pushed the government to back off on a decision they took that was totally against the will of the population. So we've seen the same thing in Senegal, whereby the protests have led to, in some way, I'm not saying that it's the only contributor, but that protest has contributed a lot to bringing to power the the main opposition party in the country. So those few examples, I think, are enough for me to tell that we should be hopeful that change is coming. It's in taking shape across the continent. Maybe it has not. It is not in the form that we would like it to be, but I think we should be hopeful looking at the good examples we have seen across the continent recently.
And just a final advice to policymakers on how to ensure greater participation of the youth, but also foster greater youth leadership.
An advice for them is to, first of all, take into account the concerns raised by the youth, not only use them as political puppets when they need them for political rallies to come and fill the numbers, but to consider their interests, to consider their concerns, to consider their views and opinion. Because as I was saying earlier during this conversation, they feel disconnected. They feel discontent about how how their countries are being led. So, and the advice is for them to come to them to engage in conversation and to create more space for the youth to participate. And also, there's an aspect that we didn't touch on. I think we need to the economic aspect of it is very important. Sometimes the youth believe that it is very expensive to participate in politics. I think we should lower the cost, in quotes, of participating in politics for the youth across the continent. I think those two ways will surely bring something different to the table.
And Lionel, I hope that we will have a conversation, particularly on that, the thresholds and the cost of participation in democratic processes. I really thank you for your time.
Sure.
Lionel
Isima
Osei, Afrobarometer's Assistant Project Manager for North and West Africa, just speaking to us about their latest flagship report on African youth, political and civic participation, just speaking about how they are not being included, even though they have the sheer demographic weight on other continents. So they 70% or more, but they seem to be participating less. And they're not leaders of the future. They are already leading, as I say, just in terms of demographic weight. But their say really does go a long way in what is happening now. So that's how we come to the end of Africa World Hour. We go into African Diaries with Shayla Ndukumana now. Young people, that's something that you talk about quite often. How are you reflecting them today?
Pardon? I missed that completely.
You were not listening to me.
I was. Listen, at some point you're saying we're going to African Diaries. I was like, okay. Then I started reading what it is I was up to. I completely missed that.
I was saying young people.
Yes.
That's something you talk about almost on a daily. How are you reflecting them today?
Yeah, talk about what?
I don't know. What's coming up on the show, in other words? Young people.
I don't. Okay. Listen, today we're looking at family dynamics, right? And we're looking at co-parenting, something that I think...
Young people? Ding, 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 ding.
Okay. All right. I see you. So co-parenting, the realities thereof. Are we finding systems that work for us currently? Are we using the legal systems in a healthy fashion? More often than not, you'll find people venting about having to go to court for their kids on social media. That has become a conversation of note. And so we're just picking off that backdrop, looking at healthy ways to promote this. I saw a study that stated that in Sweden, less than 10% of the structures are proving to be non-beneficial to children. So that means 90% plus is working. What are we missing as the African continent is what we're going to be focusing on. Also, I came here with a sole mission to serenade you with my voice today because I feel like Barry White is on the rise.
Okay. Beryl White.
Beryl. But that's what comes up on African Diaries.
All right. Thank you very much, Shayla. And that's it from us. So we're out. Good night.